before everything, I want to thanks to Tatiana Pavlova, who invited me to write about the experience of showing a photo of Yevgeniy Pavlov from the series of the violin. And I wrote this critical approach to the photography of Yevgeniy Pavlov that was presented in the ICR Institute, Cultural Institute, Romanian Cultural Institute in Paris, within the framework of the exhibition Un homme, chapitre 4, La mer Noire, November 2018, created by Camilo Racana and myself. For the last 15 years, I was working in the problematic of the image of a male image in photography. It begins when I saw in a photo, a big photo of in the collector's house, was a standing photo in the center of a hall, and with the image of a very well-known Iranian photographer living in New York, that in a moment show the women with niqab and tattooage and guns in his hands. At this moment, I saw that the photo was exactly in the sense of the people that enter in the house. I approached this photo while I was asking myself, I don't know why during the last, from 78 until 2000, we have this image of the single image of the Iranian photography was the image of Ayatollah Khomeini, the three chords image, unique photo of Ayatollah Khomeini, the image of patriarchal things, and an ideal, man ideal image. The thing that this ideal image was changed by an ideal image of woman, made it by this Iranian photographer, well-known Iranian photographers. Well, I understand that the photo is in a context. For myself, no. I always, in the way that I analyze and I work an image and a work of art, I work out context. I know the history, but the history is also a fake. It's something that the people create, that we create, that is good or bad for us. This means that I like to work the whole image in itself. It's not an idealistic thing. It's not a way to refuse the context, because this context, that I said, it depends of a lot of things. The history show us every day the things that we believe doesn't exist anymore. And I created this, my proposal was to imagine who was the man that can live with this woman. Who was the man that can live with this woman, this proposal woman? Who is the Iranian man? I take contact with one of the big artists in Iran, a very young artist. The name was Sadegh Tiraf Khan, that he was a very courageous man coming back to Iran from Canada in the center of the most complicated moment of the revolution, that he wanted to stay with his friend in Tehran. He died several years ago, but he was recognized and his work was fantastic. One of the things that talking with him, he said, listen, why do you talk about the male image? The problem is not the male image, that is a sexist image. The problem is a manhood. It's another kind. I create several chapters about working with artists, with censors too. I was censored twice. And the third time, the chapter third, was I exposed the work of the Red Ribbon from the work of the actual photographers of the Soviet Union, coming from the really Jewish nation created at the very east side of Russia, in the East Siberia until Leningrad, but working also with people, on artists, big artists from Belarus, Ukraine, Armenia, Georgia, and Iran. This was shown in a gallery named Orchamps. Once I make the fourth, and I wanted to treat the idea of the Black Sea, la Mer Noire. My point of the part, what the idea is always to try to work the image of the masculine image in contemporary photography in an oppressive social cultural environment. This social cultural environment is not just the states, the governments, it's also the groups, the small society, the people that surround us. By this simple existence, the creation of a masculine image within a constructed environment, however ephemeral it may be, becomes a mark of a space of freedom. My aim is to present examples of these men's work, these fine art photographers. This is what Anon is about. Occultation, reflection, and epiphany are the themes of Anon Chapitre 4. The artists that were exhibited were Christian Paraskiv from Romania, Yevgeniy Pavlov from Ukraine, Pavel Titovich from Russia, Dimitri Stefanov from Bulgaria, Besus Nadze from Georgia. I was a curator, and this was in November 2018 in Paris at the ICR. What I mean by oppressive environment, this is what imposed social models by autocratic means, and is with no conformity with the model leads to exemplary penalties. This is the environment where the artists of a man, the artists that I choose, live in this kind of environment. This society generates exemplary models transcribed into images that convey a precise message of what suits this society. When this moment of these models is the image of man. The norm of this man is to be vital, blind performer for social duties, and above all, to be unequivocal. While my search for the masculine image leads me to the man as a multifaceted and versatile identity, endowed with the mobility of multiple sensitive levels. Years before the exhibition of at the ICR, while I was revising Vaza online, I contacted Igor Manko, who encouraged me to find out more about Kharkiv school photography. He advised me to look for images and immerse myself in the text created by this unique artist. I thanks Igor Manko. My interest heightened after I had discovered the continuity of manual coloring in the artworks of the artists from the Kharkiv, the School of Photography, and in particular in those of Yevgeniy Pavlov, the way that is treated the manual coloring photography. At the beginning of the preparation of A Man, chapter 4, I contacted the artist, Pavlov. A few days later, Tatiana Pavlova joined us. She located the artworks of her husband and the first members of the Kharkiv school, in particular artists of the Brimia group. In her story, Tatiana focused on the outbreak induced by the violin's nude and its innovation. They intend to exhibit a series of photos. I will treat both of the things. Both the group male frontal nudity and the creation of thematic series were outside the photographic canon imposed by the Soviet regulations. Although the nude has already been treated by other photographers from the Kharkiv school, it seems that violin is from a further age. With the violin series, Yevgeniy Pavlov enjoys meeting something new, something fresh, something young, which can reveal its own and close history. Yevgeniy Pavlov finds a way to take photos outdoors, far from his usual circle. This is the main point of the difference between the intimate nude of Kharkiv school and Vremya, and the outside, the impressionist, this kind of outside photos of unknown people. Yevgeniy Pavlov finds a way to photos outdoors, far from his usual circle. He's not photographing his wife, the child, the friends, the group of friends, all the things, people that unknown people. He gets a train and meets young people, tells them a story he wants to recreate in photography. It's about a man, his feet into the river, playing the accordion for a group of young men. The guys of the train, seduced by history, propose a violin instead of an accordion. They celebrate being photographed naked in the countryside while ritualize the tale. Now, this is the story of the violin. On a sunny day, standing in the water, a naked man plays the violin for a bunch of fellows. These sunny young men, as said Tatiana, would enchant Walt Whitman. The violin series could not have existed if not for a political and social rift appeared between the end of Ukrainization promoted by the first secretary of the Communist Party, Petro Shelest, and the Sovietization of the successor, Volodymyr Shcherbitsky. Sorry by my pronunciation. The rift is a common creative space to all the photo artists from the chapters of man. The rift is integrated into the landscape. It generates myopia for the dominant environment that cannot define it, and which is often called the inverted path. Pavlov creates violin from the flow of this light that makes its way through the rift. The violin series mark a turning point in the history of the Ukrainian photography and represents one of the key exponents of the Eastern photography during the Soviet period. Nonetheless, violin complete series has never been exhibited in France. A man exposed it in France for the first time, a main work from the series. It was me who exposed the first time the violin, in the honor of this, really. Through the works proposed in each chapter of a man emerge that which is intangible. Is it close to what Whitman praises as eidolon, a fleeting and at the same time imperishable appearance? Now there's another chapter where is the grass and the snow. That's a photo. That is a photograph. We said that these things that we have in front of us in our screen, we say that it's a photograph, and we want to believe that is the naked body of a young man lying face down on the grass. This is what we think that is it. This means that we want to believe that it's a man. Yeah. In one of his hands, moreover, the only one visible, he holds a violin. It is a luminous form without shadows. The surrounding grass is not damaged. There is no sign of any past action to know why it is there or how it got there. It's a fact, a historical void. Everything is calm, pristine. At the artist's request, before the exhibition, the photo has no frame, only glass. Usually, in a photography exhibit, the spectator tends to get closer to the photo. As he moves forward, he sees the reflection of his body, then that of his face, and finally, it is his eyes that are looking at him from the photo. As when worshipping with the icons, the spectator's reflection joins the body image and participates in the scene. He mutters to himself, "I am here," and kisses her. There was a shift from one context to the other, from telling the photographic story to a present moment intimately shared in silence between the spectator and the spectrum. This is a very important point for my own work, the intimate relationship between the image, not an image, the photo itself, and the spectator. If a photo is trying to reveal a desire, if a photo is trying to reveal a desire, exposing a photo is a secret route to fulfilling that desire. The artwork on display is no longer a photography. The artwork on display fully reveals the scene the photo artist aspired to, and which he has never been able to capture in his entirety. Without the ephemeral fusion between the spectator's reflection and the photo, there will be no image. They will not end alone. This photograph of Yevgeniy Pavlov has its extent in this other created by the young contemporary and photo-Ukrainian artist Yaroslav Solov. If Pavlov's works opens the path of the exhibition, A Man, Chapter 4, that of Solov opened the path of the exhibition, A Man, Chapter 3. Solov gathers a group of young people of a series of nude photos, most at night. Those photographs would constitute the backbone of the plastic mythology series. In Crimea, a Trojan horse, this photo, the pristine body of the spectrum is in the same storyline as the Pavlov photo, as myself, is lying under the two barbed branches of black tree and coiled on a pile of snow, legs and arms resting awake, eyes riveted on the one who challenged his gaze. From the forked branches rested with the snow legs ranks of a V tree are hanging two road signs. One is a military tank warning, and the other one point out the way to Crimea. Behind the naked immaculate body a wire wall shines. Alongside the tree, the wires divide a wooden wall into two sections. The front part of the wooden wall is well preserved, while the other part, on the other side of the fence, is blurred in shades of gray. Everything indicates a before and after of both sides of the border. These are two moments in the same single instant. Crimea, a Trojan horse, was created at the beginning of the last conflict in Ukraine in 2013. Note how an oval halo at the light surrounds the image of Pavlov photo, and how the lines and the square surface design the artwork of Solov. Once I asked Tatiana why to manually insert color pigments into the black and white negative. She replied calmly, for years, everything was gray. As Pavlov and other members of the Remia, or the Kharkiv School of Photography, Solovs use coloring as well as manual tracing and intervenes digitally in the original photography. If Pavlov's attacks the forms of the photography it imagines, discovering and covering the versions of the first photo, Solov slides transparent blueprints out onto the geometric layout of the matrix of the digital image. Both of them introduce the traits that are essential for the perception of the final image. Too much is not enough. The amount of formal modification in the basic shot increases the impossibility to obtain the desired image. For this reason, the series is a celebration whose function is a centrifugal criticism of regulatory proposals. It is through the manner to treat the tale that the two artists report on the event that entrenches them. These two examples of the work of these two artists are not a record of the current affair of Ukraine at peace or Ukraine at war. This image of peace and war, these images are images of peace and war in Ukraine. From the reef, they illuminate. This text was written in Prague from the day of Pentecost until the day of the Assumption of the Virgin, last day in the 20th year of the 20th century, I mean. Thanks to you. Here am I. That's all.
Yevgeniy Racana, thank you very much for your presentation. Do we have any questions? It's kind of interesting that our lecture is so active and audience is so passive with questions. Maybe
you.
Maybe people will warm up a little bit more. I have no questions, but I really enjoyed this talk, and as in my presentation, and Agni also mentioned this Vitas Lutskus and this theater. So you as curator, not only of art and theater, it's very interesting how it is like in between of those mediums, and even starting with Edvard Hartwig. So for me, it's very interesting to trace those things back. And when you were talking, I was just making some connections in my head, you know, with all of those things. So it's really, really interesting, and giving a like larger image in your head, like not just like a picture you see, but the image that is staying behind the picture. So it's really great. So no questions, just really great emotions after your lecture.
May I say two things about your commentary?
Yes, please.
I don't believe that a photo is an image.
No, okay.
And I think that image is something that you construct for a moment. How many times we are with our family, with our friends, or someone, an old person, even us, and take an old photo, look at the photo, try to recognize who we are, who is the person in the photo, and suddenly we kiss the photo. I think that this relationship is create the image. It's not because the image, the photo is kissed, because the force, the strength of this image moves a kind of work of not only imaginary, but the memory, the reconstruction, the rebuild.
The context in which you put in the
The other thing is that if I came from the theater, it's because I came from the opera. When I was a child, I liked against my mother. She doesn't want that I went to the opera. I was very, very characters, very bad characters. I wanted to know the opera, and the opera gave me this space. I was in the name we say the Poulailler is the very top of the opera house, and I have 11 years old, and I remember to watch Tristan and Isolde 7 hours in Germany, top, standing, looking the opera, and understand what is the idea of the space. This problematic of the space and a body in the space is the same problematic for me today that I treat when I must hang a picture, to put in sculpture, to put an object, to put a photo. For this reason, for me, was very interesting to use the desire of Tatiana that asked me not to put frames, but just glasses. It's around all this, the idea of the reflection, the pure reflection.
Oops.
Whoopa, that I was that I worked this exhibition. Well, I don't bother you anymore.
You cannot bother us. Actually, we have one question for you from Tatiana Pavlova.
Oh, Tatiana.
And I will read it. Dear Camilo, thank you for your attention to Kharkiv photography. Thank you for agreeing to talk about your deep regarding of photographs of Ukrainian authors whom you have included in your unusually interesting and so topical project, L'Homme, which you have been implementing so consistently for many years at the exhibitions in Paris. I really want to hope that the next issue of your photo project, L'Homme, will be shown in Ukraine. What do you think about it?
Well, I think that you have a development in art development that is very strong in Ukraine, but also I have the same feelings in other ex-Soviet countries, even in Russia. There is a very strange way to work because you kind of you can't to put close a very strong past, artistic past, the moment that the people know how to do. And this kind of new people that trying to work with this kind of flat, empty photos. For this reason, it was very interesting for me to combine the idea that was completely random between the image of Pavlov and the image of Solov. Even if they're from different schools, so they're different branches, they work in something that is really, really interesting to work on. And I like to work in Ukraine, of course. I was last year in Ukraine, and I saw wonderful work. I work a lot in Baroque art, and I saw some works that were really incredible things, and also in photography, of course. And I want to work again with Tatiana. I know that you have a huge exhibition of Kharkiv school in this year. It was curated by people from Pompidou. And I hope that they will bring the work of all these artists. Maybe the way that this kind of institutional work is a very formal way. And I think that you must go to understand the desire, the situation, this imaginary created by artists. I remarked two things when I work in Romania, and Ukraine, and in Belarus, that the people is working, the nakedness, for instance, is working indoors. And the work is themselves and the near people. The difference of Pavlov is that he imposed a work outdoors. This is a very, very important moment of photography, I think. It's not to work the own family, the friends, his own life naked. But the thing is that he go outside. He seduce a group of this. You understand? Is another way. Is another step, and it is very, very, very important because even these people are not models, like normal people, common people that he seduce. This is the main point, and I think that was a dangerous point. The dangerous point and make a distinction, the way to the series, the way to be outside the house is a main important things. When you work with Romania, with Belarus, and with Ukraine, you see, for instance, that in all these countries, the people are working in trying to put color in the image, to work with a colored image. I always ask it why, because when you color the image, even the way that Pavlov worked, that he worked with the errors, with the mistakes of the film, it's a kind of to cover the image. You can cover the image.
Yeah.
I remember one thing when I finished about the color and about the difference of the other photographies of Kharkiv. I remember that until the Crimea War, from Napoleon, don't allow to be the corpses photographies. You have no corpses before Crimea war in the history of photography. You cannot photography a war with people dying. It was after this. The person who made this was an Italian, very important. He and his brother were photographers, so they photographed the first images of them. And then suddenly they went to Japan at the end of the 18th, 19th century. And in Japan, they started to color the image. All the colored image that you see, the first images colored that you see in photography came from Japan, were colored by these people. but this same thing. This means that the color is always something very strange and particular, is inclusive or intrusive to the film of the things. I don't speak anymore. I see a man that is looking here. I say hello. And I was very happy also to see.
Yeah, so it was very nice to listen to you, and as I understood from the question of Tatiana and your answer and the speech, that some other projects will come, if not soon, but in some future between you, like Ukrainian art field and you. So thank you very much.
So.
Thank you very much. It was Camilo Racana, curator, producer, creator, organizer of cultural events, and artistic director, and like just a great person. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Was difficult, but it was good.